Hey everyone, hope you're all in a good mood today because I've got a new story for you. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, it really means a lot to me. I turned off the shower so I could hear him better. And that's how I found out my boyfriend of 2 years thought I was the dumbest girl he'd ever dated. Some quick context. I'm 27, he's 29, we'll call him Danny. We live in Sioux Falls, which nobody ever believes is a real place people choose. But my whole family is here, so whatever. We've been in this duplex on the north side for about a year and a half. Thin walls, which matters later. Danny and I met through my cousin Will. Will's known him since middle school and vouched for him hard. Which, we're gonna circle back to Will because Will is a whole storyline in this. Here's the thing about our money situation that I need to explain before anyone comes at me in the comments. Because I already know what you're gonna say. When we moved in together, Danny was between things. He'd left his job in the spring, said the place was a mess, said he had 2 people already reaching out to him and it was just a matter of picking. And I believed him because why wouldn't I? He had a whole story with names in it and details and he seemed genuinely stressed about it. So I said I'd float the rent for a couple months. That was the deal, verbally, sitting at my kitchen table with the wobbly leg that we still haven't fixed. Those couple months turned into me covering rent, utilities, groceries, his phone bill after he forgot to move it off his mom's plan, and about half his car payment. For over a year. And every single time it came up, he had this whole thing where he'd get quiet and start talking about how humiliating it was for him. How he hated feeling like a burden. How he'd pay me back the second things turned around, and honestly, he was so convincing about being ashamed that I ended up comforting him about it. I'd be the one saying it's fine. We're a team. Don't think about it. I was doing the emotional labor of making him feel okay about the fact that I was paying for his existence. My mom knew. Not all of it, but enough. Her name's Della, and she is not a subtle woman. She brought it up at Thanksgiving in front of everyone, asked Danny straight out how the job search was going, and he gave this whole answer about the market being brutal right now, and how he was being selective because he didn't want to jump into something and be miserable. And my dad, Christopher, who normally doesn't say anything at family stuff because he'd rather be in the garage, actually looked up from his plate and said that selective was a rich man's word. Just that. Then went back to eating. Danny laughed like it was a joke and my mom changed the subject and I spent the entire drive home telling Danny that my dad didn't mean anything by it. Which, again, I was doing all the work. Okay, so, the shower thing. This was in March. A Wednesday. I remember because I'd picked up an extra shift and I was disgusting and I just wanted to stand under hot water for 20 minutes. Our bathroom shares a wall with the living room, and I've told you about the walls. Normally there's just enough noise that you get muffled sounds. You know someone's talking, but not what about. He was on the phone with his friend Eric. Eric's been around since forever. He's got this loud laugh you can hear through anything, and he was clearly on speaker because I could hear both of them. I heard my name. That's it. That's all it took. I heard my name. And then something about the rent thing and I reached over and turned the water off. I want you guys to picture this. I'm standing in a tub with conditioner still in my hair, shivering, holding the shower curtain so it doesn't rustle, with my ear basically against the tile. And I stood there for probably 11 minutes. He told Eric that I pay for everything and I don't even question it. Then he said, and I'm not going to soften this because I've replayed it enough times that I could type it in my sleep, that honestly I was the dumbest girl he'd ever dated. And Eric laughed. Eric, who I've fed at my table, who I drove home from a birthday thing in November because he was too drunk to drive, who texts me happy birthday every year with 3 emojis. He laughed, and then he asked Danny how long he thought he could ride it out. Danny said as long as she keeps offering. Then it got worse, because they kept talking, and this is where it stopped being about money at all. Danny started doing a bit, like a whole comedy routine about me. He did an impression of how I talk when I'm excited about something. He told Eric about a fight we'd had in January about his mom's birthday and he told it completely wrong. He made me sound unhinged. He left out the part where he forgot to tell me about the dinner until the day of and I'd already picked up a shift. And Eric was going along with it, saying stuff like that's what happens when they get comfortable. The thing that actually got me, more than the dumbest girl line, was when Eric asked if he was going to stay with me. And Danny said he'd figure it out. He said he wasn't going to make any moves until he was set up. Until he was set up, like I was a place he was staying. I stood there until they hung up and then I turned the water back on and finished my shower and rinsed the conditioner out and dried my hair and put on my sweatpants and went out into the living room and asked him if he wanted to order from the Mexican place on the corner. I know. Comments are going to be brutal about this and I get it. But here's my actual reasoning, and I want you to sit with it before you judge me. I was 27 years old. In a duplex I couldn't afford a loan. with a car that needed $900 of work I'd been putting off because I was paying his phone bill. If I'd exploded right then, at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, what happens? He denies it. He says I misheard through a wall. He says I was in the shower with water running, I didn't hear anything. And then I've shown my hand and he starts being careful. And I still can't afford the apartment. And I'm the crazy girlfriend who eavesdropped. So I smiled. I ate a burrito bowl next to him on the couch and he put his hand on my leg and I let him and I laughed at the show we were watching. I want you to understand I was not calm. I wasn't at peace. I was already doing math in my head about what I needed and how long it would take to get it. The first thing I did was call my cousin Will. Not about Danny, technically, I called him to ask about the Nissan. Because Will's the family car guy and he'd been telling me for months to bring it by. But I brought it by on a Saturday. And while he had it up, I asked him, real casual, how well he actually knew Eric. And Will got this look. He wiped his hands on the rag for way too long and then he said Eric was fine. And then he said, unprompted, that he'd told Danny a while back to stop talking about me like that at poker. At poker. So I said like that how? And Will realized what he'd walked into. He tried to backpedal, said it was guy stuff, said everyone talks. And I stood in his driveway and pushed. I asked what specifically. I asked how long, I asked who was there. And Will finally said that it'd been going on basically since we moved in together. That Danny would make jokes about the rent. That a couple guys had told him to knock it off and a couple had thought it was funny. And that he'd assumed I knew what Danny was like because I lived with him. He assumed I knew. I asked him why he never said anything to me and he gave me this whole thing about how it wasn't his business. How he'd introduced us and if he blew it up, he'd be the guy who blew it up. How his wife Kristen had actually told him to stay out of it. Which, I found out later, was not exactly what Kristen said. But that's a whole other fight and it's not the fight for today. I didn't yell at Will. I wanted to. I got in my car with the check engine light still on because he hadn't finished. And I sat in his driveway for a second. And then I went back and knocked on the garage door frame and told him that if he ever again decided something wasn't his business while I was paying somebody's phone bill, we were done as family. And he said okay. That's it. Just okay. Men. Over the next few weeks I did two things. First, I stopped offering. That's it. I didn't announce anything, I didn't have a conversation, I just stopped preemptively covering things. And you would not believe how fast that surfaced. Within 9 days, he was asking me if I could grab his portion of the electric, because his transfer was pending. Pending from what? Danny? Pending from where? Second thing, and this is the part where it starts getting good, so stay with me. His mom, Nancy, started texting me. Not about anything, just normal stuff, links to things. A picture of a chair she was thinking about. Nancy and I have always been okay. Not close, but okay. And I noticed she'd gotten a lot friendlier around the same time Danny started getting weird about money. And I remember thinking that was an odd little coincidence, but not knowing what to do with it yet. Then at the end of April, Danny told me he wanted to talk about our lease renewal. The renewal was up in June. And he sat me down at the wobbly table and told me he'd been thinking, and that he thought we should look at something bigger. Maybe over in the eastern part of town. And he had this whole pitch about how it was time to plan for the next step. He used the phrase next step. He said he'd been working on some things he wanted to tell me about when they were solid. And I sat there and nodded and said that sounded exciting. Because I'd found something out about a week before that, and I hadn't said a word about it yet. And I was not going to say a word about it until I had every single piece. I'm gonna stop here because this is already long and I need to figure out how to tell the next part without doxing myself. But I'll say this much. The money was never the point. The money was the boring part. What I found out in May was so much worse, and it involved his mother. And I still don't know if my own family knew. Anyway, he still thinks I don't question anything. Update. Okay, so a bunch of you called me a doormat in the comments, and honestly, fair. I'd have said the same thing reading it. But shout out to the person who said she's not being passive, she's being patient. There's a difference because you got it. And I'm about to prove it. Also to the guy who kept commenting that I should have just dumped him that night, yes, obviously. In a vacuum. In a vacuum, I also would have had a full month of rent saved and a car that closes on all 4 sides. So Nancy, I mentioned she'd gotten friendly out of nowhere, texting me chairs and links and stuff. That started making sense in the middle of April when she called me directly. Not Danny, me. And asked if I could come by and help her move some boxes out of her spare room. She lives about 20 minutes out past the fairgrounds, and she wanted me specifically because Danny had so much going on. So much going on. He'd watched 4 hours of a docu-series about deep sea fish the night before. I went. Because I actually don't mind Nancy, and because I had a feeling I couldn't name yet. And we're carrying these plastic totes down to her basement, and she's chatting the whole time. And about halfway through, she said something like, "Well, once you two are settled in the new place, you'll finally have room for all this." I put the tote down. I asked what new place. And Nancy did this thing where she went completely bright and cheerful. Like she'd stepped on something and was pretending she hadn't. She said she must have gotten ahead of herself. That Danny had mentioned you two were looking at bigger places. That's all. And then she immediately started talking about her neighbor's fence. I let her have it. I helped her finish the boxes and I drank the Diet Coke she gave me, and I asked about her sister's hip. And then when I was leaving, I stood in her doorway and asked her, very normal, how long Danny had been planning the move. She said since around Christmas. He sat me down at my own table in April and gave me a whole speech about how he'd been thinking. Like it had just occurred to him. He'd been telling his mother about it since December. Because here's the part that started eating me. If he'd been planning a bigger place since Christmas. With what money? He wasn't working. I was paying for a 2-bedroom duplex where the shower pressure depends on whether the neighbor upstairs is doing dishes. So either he expected me to pay for a nicer one, which, sure, on brand, or something else was happening. I went with the something else, because there was a detail bugging me. In February, he'd gone to Sioux City twice, both times for a thing with a guy about work. I remember it because the second time was the weekend of my mom's birthday brunch and he skipped it, and Della has not stopped bringing it up since. He came back both times in a good mood, and at the time I filed it under him finally hustling. Now I was sitting in my car outside my own duplex, thinking about how a person with no job takes 2 trips in 1 month. I didn't snoop. I want that on the record, because I know how this genre goes, and I know some of you were hoping. I didn't touch his phone, I wouldn't have gotten in anyway. He changed the passcode in January and told me it was because of a scam text. Which, sure, Danny. What I did instead was way more effective. Which is that I started asking him questions. Constantly, like a completely normal girlfriend who is interested in her boyfriend's life. How was the guy in Sioux City? What's his name again? Oh, is he the one you know through Eric or the other one? What's the actual company? What do they do? When would you start? Would you have to travel? Is it commission? Would we have insurance through it? You guys, he could not keep it straight. Not because I was clever, but because he'd never had to say any of it out loud twice. First time the guy's name was Grant. A week later, Grant became Grant's partner. The company sold something to dealerships. Then it was software for dealerships. Then it was kind of a startup thing. And every time I asked one more question than he expected, he'd get this thing where he'd start telling me I was making it stressful. That he didn't want to jinx it. That he'd tell me when it was real. And could I just be excited for him for once? For once. I had been excited for him for a year and a half. I had been excited for him about a job that did not exist while paying for his phone. Anyway, that's the boring thread. Here's the one that actually detonated. My dad. So Christopher, my dad, does not participate in family drama. He participates in transmissions. He has said maybe 9 full sentences to Danny in 2 years, and most of them were about tires. But my mom talks to him constantly, and my mom had been talking to him about the rent thing for a year. So he knew more than he'd ever let on. Beginning of May, my parents had people over for my nephew's birthday. Little thing, backyard. My sister-in-law made too much food. Danny came because I asked him to, and I could tell he didn't want to. He spent the first hour on his phone by the cooler. And my dad, out of nowhere, in front of my mom, my brother Kristen, Will, and a 4-year-old with a cupcake, asked Danny how much he was in for on the rent now. Just like that. Dead flat. Holding a paper plate. The backyard did that thing where everyone suddenly needs to look at something. My mom said Christopher in this warning way. And Danny, and I have to give him credit for how fast he moved, laughed and said they were working it out. That he'd had a rough stretch. That he was actually about to have some news. My dad said news doesn't pay rent. And then Danny said the thing that ended my ability to keep playing nice. He said, half joking, that honestly I liked taking care of him. That it made me feel needed. In my parents' backyard. To my father. I stood up and I told him to say it again. He tried to laugh it off, said it was a compliment. I said no, say it again. Say the part about how I like it. And he started doing the thing where he gets very reasonable and lowers everything down and tells me it's not the place. That we're at a kid's birthday. That we can talk in the car. I told him we could talk right there since he'd started it right there in front of my entire family. And I asked him what exactly he thought he was contributing to a household where I paid for the internet he'd been on since we arrived. Will got up and started collecting cups. Coward. Danny stood there with his plate and told me I was embarrassing him. And I said that was interesting. That he was worried about being embarrassed in front of people. And he said, what's that supposed to mean? I almost said it. the shower, Eric, all of it. It was right there in my mouth and I could taste it. And I didn't, because I looked over and my dad was watching me. Not Danny, me. And I knew that if I threw the whole thing on the ground right then in front of a 4-year-old, I'd never get the rest of it. I still didn't know what Sioux City was. I still didn't know what Christmas was. So I said we'd talk at home, and I walked inside and washed my hands for a stupid amount of time. My mom followed me in. And I need to talk about my mother for a second because everyone assumes moms are automatically on your side, and mine is on the side of getting things handled correctly. She told me that was ugly and that my father shouldn't have started it and that I shouldn't have finished it in front of the baby. I said the baby is 4 and was eating frosting off his fist and did not care. Then she said the thing that made me actually go off, which was that if I was going to keep paying for a grown man, I couldn't be surprised when people had opinions about it. I told her she'd known for a year and said nothing except one comment at Thanksgiving. She said she'd tried, that I always defended him, that every time she brought it up I told her he was going through something. Which, okay, that's true. That one landed and I hated it. Then she said maybe I should think about why I need to be the one holding everything together for people. Which is the kind of thing my mother says when she wants to win, and I told her I was not doing this at a birthday party. And she said fine. And then she cried in the kitchen, which is her ultimate move, and I ended up hugging her. My dad came in later while I was putting foil on a tray and said one thing. He said the man's not looking for work, he's looking for the next place to sit. Then he took the tray from me and went outside. The car ride home was 40 minutes of Danny explaining. And I want to be really clear that he did not go silent. And he did not sulk. He talked the entire drive. He apologized for the wording. He said he meant it as I'm the kind of person who takes care of people, and that's a good thing about me. He said my dad has never liked him and has been waiting for a chance. He said my family talks about him behind his back and he can feel it every time he walks in. Then he said, and this is the one I keep thinking about, that he never asked me to pay for anything. That, I offered. I pulled over. On Minnesota Ave, in front of a tire place, with the check engine light on, and I asked him if he really wanted to run that one, because I could go through it month by month if he wanted. He said fine, that I'd offered at first, and then it became a system, and he'd let it because he was in a hole and he was ashamed. He said, do you know what it does to a guy? He said his own father, and yeah, his dad's a whole thing. His dad left when he was 9, and Nancy raised him, and he uses that like a hall pass. He brings it out whenever he's losing. And it worked. Kind of. Not because I forgave him. Because I remembered that I still needed 2 more weeks. So I said I understood he was ashamed. I said we'd figure it out. And he held my hand the rest of the way home and told me he was going to fix everything. That when this thing came through I'd see that he'd been trying to do something big and I was going to feel stupid for doubting him. I was going to feel stupid. That was the second time in 2 months he'd used a version of that word about me. And I don't think he even noticed. Here's where I'm at. And this is the part I actually need advice on, because 2 things happened at the end of May within about 4 days of each other. The first is that Nancy called me again. Not about boxes. She wanted to know if I'd talked to Danny about the timeline, and when I said what timeline, she got very quiet, and then said she'd assumed we'd discussed it, and that she didn't want to be in the middle, and could I please not tell him she'd said anything. Then she said, and I'm quoting this as best I can, that she'd told him from the start he needed to be honest with me about it because it wasn't fair. About what, Nancy, she wouldn't say. She said it wasn't hers to tell, and she was sorry, and she got off the phone. And the second thing is that I got home from a shift on a Thursday, and Danny wasn't there but his gym bag was open on the bed, which is not unusual, he's a slob, and sitting right on top of it was a set of keys that were not his, and not mine, and not to anything in our apartment. I didn't touch them. I took a picture of them with my own phone, and I put my stuff down, and I made dinner, and when he came home 2 hours later, I asked him about his day, and he told me about the gym. Our lease is up June 20th. I have not signed anything. He doesn't know that either. Update coming when I actually make him say it out loud, because I'm done asking questions I already know the answers to. He's about to find out how much the dumbest girl he's ever dated has been paying attention. Last update, the keys were to Nancy's house. Her spare room. The one I helped her clear out with my own 2 hands, carrying totes down her basement stairs while she brought me a Diet Coke and thanked me for being such a help. I didn't ask Danny a single question about it. I called his mother instead, on the Sunday, and I told her I'd been thinking about what she said on the phone about how she'd told him from the start he had to be honest with me, and that I knew about the room now, and I just wanted to know when he'd asked her for it. She started apologizing before I finished the sentence, and she gave me the date without me even pushing, December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, sitting at her kitchen table. while I was at work covering a holiday shift specifically, so we'd have the extra money for January. He asked his mother if he could have the spare room to get himself set up. And when she asked him what he was going to tell me, he told her I'd be fine because I liked having someone to take care of. That's the third time I'd heard that phrase come back to me secondhand. He said it to his mother in December, he said it to my father in a backyard in May, and he said it to Eric through a bathroom wall in March, and every single time he thought he was describing something nice about me. Nancy's birthday was June 14th, her 58th, Saturday. At her house, the whole family, her sister with the hip, his cousin Adrian, the cousins with the kids, 2 neighbors, and Eric. Because Eric has been showing up to Nancy's birthday since they were 11 years old and he is treated like one of her sons. I told Danny I wanted to go and that I wanted to bring something. I made the corn casserole his mom likes, the one with the crackers on top. I bought a card and I actually wrote in it a real message. Because I meant it, Nancy was the only person in that entire situation who'd tried to do the right thing and just wasn't strong enough to do it. I got ready in our bathroom, same wall. And Danny leaned in the doorway and told me I seemed like myself again lately, and asked if things felt better between us. And I told him, yeah, honestly, I feel great. Then I loaded the back of my car while he was in the shower. His PlayStation, the monitor I bought in October when he told me he needed a proper setup to do applications on, the Bluetooth speaker, his good winter coat from Shields that I got him last Christmas, and the older one I got him the Christmas before, the AirPods, the gym bag, the weighted vest he wanted for his walks, the electric razor, his nice boots, and I went through it. Because I wasn't taking one single thing I hadn't personally paid for out of my own account, which, and I hate this, was almost everything he owned that wasn't a t-shirt or a pair of jeans from before we met. I got there first because he wanted to stop for gas. On my card, last time, I gave Nancy the card and put the casserole down with everything else, and hugged her. And while she still had her arms around me, I told her quietly that today was going to be bad and I was sorry it was landing on her birthday. She pulled back and looked at me for a second and she said okay. That was it. 6 months of feeling sick about it and she just said okay, and went to get the good plates out. Danny came in about 20 minutes later, kissed his mom on the cheek, went straight to the food, made his little joke about how the casserole was the only reason he stayed with me. His aunt laughed. Then he took a beer out to the patio and Eric was already there, and they did the handshake thing they do. And I stood at the kitchen window and watched them do it. I waited until everyone had food. That was my one real decision. Not the date, not the place, just that. Because I've been to 100 of these things, and I know that the 10 minutes after everyone sits down with a full plate is the only 10 minutes where nobody wanders off. Then I went out to the patio and I said, loud, across the whole yard, that I had something for Eric. And he goes, for me? Grinning, already laughing. That laugh you can hear through drywall. So I told him I'd been thinking a lot about the phone call in March, the Wednesday one. And I watched him sit there trying to work out which phone call, and I watched Danny set his plate down on the arm of the chair. Very carefully, like the plate was the problem. I told the yard. All of it. I said that in March I was in the shower and I heard my name come through the wall. And I reached over and turned the water off and stood there in the dark with conditioner in my hair for 11 minutes listening to my boyfriend of 2 years tell his best friend that I pay for everything, and don't even question it. I said he told Eric I was the dumbest girl he'd ever dated. I said Eric laughed and asked how long he thought he could ride it out, and Danny said as long as she keeps offering. Danny was up before I finished. He started with me being drunk, which I'd had half a White Claw. Then it was that this isn't the time and this isn't the place and it's his mother's birthday and did I have any respect for anybody? And I said that's funny. I asked myself that exact question in March, standing in a bathtub. Eric tried to get in front of it. Said it wasn't like that. Said guys talk and it doesn't mean anything, and he'd told Danny more than once to knock it off. And I said no. You didn't tell him to knock it off, you asked him how long he could ride it out. And then you laughed when he did the impression of my voice. And Eric said what impression? And I did it. I did Danny's impression of me, the one he does when I'm excited about something. Right there in his mother's backyard, in front of his aunt and 2 neighbors and everybody. Adrian said, Jesus Christ, Danny. One of the kids started crying because of how loud it had gotten and somebody took her inside. That's when it stopped being anything like a conversation. Danny came off the patio at me talking over the top of everything, saying I'd planned this, that I'd made a casserole and driven to his mother's house and sat in her kitchen and planned this like some kind of psycho. And I said yes. Yes, I planned it. I've been planning it since March. which is 3 full months less than you've been planning to move into the spare room down that hallway. And the whole yard turned, because most of them had no idea. His aunt said, "What room?" Adrian said, "You've been living with her." And Nancy, at her own birthday, with a paper plate in her hand, in front of her sister and her neighbors, said the date out loud. December 27th. Said she'd been telling him for 6 months to be honest with me and he wouldn't do it. And now everybody was finding out at once. And whose fault was that exactly? He turned on his own mother in front of everyone, told her she had no business in it, that she'd been in his ear since Christmas, that this was between him and me and she'd made it worse by talking to me behind his back. And Nancy told him she'd rather be the villain of his story than sit at that table one more holiday knowing what she knew, and that she'd taken his side her whole life and it hadn't made him a better man. It had just made him comfortable. Her sister was saying, Nancy, sit down." Nancy did not sit down. Then he came back to me and, credit where it's due, he never once said sorry. Not one time. He went for the whole speech, loud. Because now he wanted witnesses too. That I made him feel like a charity case. That I never let him say no. That every time he tried to talk about money, I'd shut it down with "we're a team" and change the subject. That I liked being the one holding everything up because it made me the good one, and him the project. He said, "Do you know what it does to a man to be handed everything?" And somebody's neighbor actually said out loud, "Well, don't take it then." I told him, "Fine. Let's fix that right now." I went out to the driveway and opened the back of the Rogue and I started carrying it up the lawn. The PlayStation first, then the monitor, then both coats, then the speaker, the vest, the boots, the razor, the AirPods. And I read the list out loud as I set each thing down, month and year where I remembered it. Because I wanted every single person standing on that lawn to hear exactly what a grown man's whole life costs when somebody else is buying it for him. He followed me the entire way, up and back, telling me I was insane, that I was making a scene, that he would pay me back for every bit of it. And I asked him, with what? Danny, with what? And he didn't have anything. And behind him, Eric had gone completely still by the fence with his beer, not saying one word in his best friend's defense. And I turned around and told Eric he could skip the happy birthday text this year. Then I gave Danny the last one, which I'd been sitting on since May. Our lease was up June 20th. I never renewed it. I signed a 1-bedroom for myself back in May, while he sat at my wobbly kitchen table, pitching me a bigger place on the east side with money he did not have and was never going to have. 6 days. He had 6 days and a front lawn full of things he owned because I bought them. He asked where I was moving. I told him that's not information he gets. He tried to get in the car with me, had his hand on the door and was still going, still explaining, saying we needed to sit down like 2 adults, and that I'd humiliated him in front of his entire family and he had never once done anything like that to me. He said that. Out loud in that driveway after 40 people had just heard what he did to me. Adrian pulled him back off the door. Somebody's cousin was absolutely filming. I got 4 blocks and pulled into a Casey's and sat there for a while, not crying, just sitting with my hands on the wheel, and then I bought a Diet Coke and went home and started packing my kitchen. The aftermath, since I know that's what you're here for. He's in the spare room. He got precisely what he asked his mother for on December 27th, 6 months early, with an audience, and without the version of the story where he's a man getting back on his feet. 2 days later, he called my mother. Told Della he was worried about me, that I'd been off for months and secretive and he thought I needed somebody to talk to. My mother told him that if he ever called her about her daughter again, she'd have my father call him back. And then she called me and yelled at me for 20 solid minutes for not telling her in March. Because apparently I have a habit of handling everything by myself, and she's decided that's her failure as a parent. And now she wants to have a talk about it. I'm avoiding it. Will apologized, sort of. Turns out Kristen told him to tell me after the very first poker night, and he told me the opposite in his driveway because he didn't want to look like he'd been sitting on it for a year. So that's a thing in their marriage now, and it is not my thing. Eric sent 2 long texts. I haven't answered and I'm not blocking him, I want them to just sit there. Nancy still texts me. I still answer. Danny's telling everyone I ambushed him at his own mother's birthday party, which is completely true, and it's the only accurate thing he said about me in 2 years. I moved on the 19th. My dad brought his truck and didn't say one single word about any of it the entire day. And then when the last box was in the apartment, he asked if the check engine light was still on. It is.